The man's voice cut through the hum of the supermarket like a blade. "Why don't you go back to where you came from?" he barked, his face red, spittle flying with each word. The fluorescent lights above seemed to make his fury even harsher, casting deep shadows under his wrinkled brow. All eyes in the checkout lanes shifted toward the confrontation. Some customers froze with their baskets mid-air. Others pretended to be busy scanning the candy racks, though their ears remained tuned to the storm brewing at register number 7. Amina stood there, wrapped in her navy blue hijab, her 6-year-old son Adam clutching her arm. Her posture was upright, her face calm, though her chest rose and fell with measured breaths. Inside, a tremor ran through her, but her dark eyes did not betray fear. "People like you," the man spat, "are the reason this country is falling apart. You come here, you take our jobs, and then you walk around dressed like that, like some terrorist." A few gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone near the soda fridge raised their phone, recording. Another whispered, "Oh my God." Adam tugged at his mother's sleeve, his voice barely audible. "Mama, let's go. Please." But Amina did not move. She placed her hand gently on Adam's small shoulder. Her voice was steady, quiet, and carried a strange authority that made even the cashier freeze mid-scan. "It's okay, my son," she whispered. And then, without raising her voice, without anger, Amina did something no one in that supermarket would forget. The morning had begun quietly, with the Texas sun streaming through the thin curtains of their small apartment. The old clock on the kitchen wall ticked louder than usual, reminding Amina that time was slipping quickly toward the errands she needed to run. She placed 2 slices of bread into the toaster and turned toward Adam, who sat cross-legged on the floor, building a spaceship from mismatched Lego pieces. His hair stuck up in every direction, and his eyes shone with the unshakable optimism of a child who had not yet learned the full weight of the world's judgments. "Breakfast first, astronaut," Amina said with a smile. Adam giggled, abandoning his half-built craft, and climbed onto the chair. "Do astronauts eat toast too?" he asked. "Of course," she replied, buttering the bread. "But they eat it floating in space. Much harder to keep the jam from flying away." Adam laughed, banging his tiny fist on the table in delight. For a moment, Amina allowed herself to bask in that sound. It reminded her of Damascus, of mornings when she was a girl, when the air carried the smell of cardamom coffee and her father's voice echoed gently through their house. But those memories, sweet as they were, carried a shadow. The home she once knew was gone, and she had built a new one here in Texas, with its wide skies and strangers' stares. By 10 a.m., she had her black abaya ironed neatly, her hijab pinned securely, and Adam dressed in his superhero t-shirt and jeans. They set out for the supermarket. Adam carried a tiny list he had written himself, with crooked letters: milk, eggs, bread, apple juice. The air outside was heavy, warm, pressing against their skin as they walked to the car. Amina felt that old, familiar awareness sharpen inside her, the sense of being seen, weighed, judged. In her neighborhood, she was the only woman who wore a hijab. The drive to the supermarket was short, but her mind wandered. She thought of the news she had seen the night before, another story of vandalism at a mosque in a nearby town. She thought of the tense look on her landlord's face when he reminded her rent was due. She thought of Adam, of the way he had asked last week, "Mama, why don't other moms wear scarves like you?" She never told him the truth, that the scarf that gave her dignity also painted a target on her back. Instead, she had said, "Because every family is different, Habibi." And that's a beautiful thing. When they entered the supermarket, the icy blast of air conditioning made Adam shiver. He grabbed the cart handle eagerly. "I'll drive, Mama." She chuckled, letting him push with all his little strength. As they moved through the aisles, Amina caught the glances. They came the way they always did. Quick flicks of the eyes, whispers behind hands, mothers pulling children a little closer, as if her mere presence carried danger. A group of teenagers by the cereal shelf snickered as they passed. One muttered something under his breath, just loud enough. "ISIS lady." Amina's heart clenched, but she kept walking. Adam, thankfully, was too busy comparing colorful boxes of cereal to notice. She had mastered this silence, this heavy, unspoken weight. She carried it like a second skin. If she reacted, if she shouted, she would only confirm their fears. So she swallowed it down, one glance at a time, one whisper at a time. At the produce section, Adam reached up and grabbed a shiny apple. "This one's perfect, Mama. It's red like Iron Man." She smiled, ruffling his hair. "Then we'll take it." Slowly, they filled their cart. Milk, eggs, bread, apple juice. Amina added lentils, rice, and fresh herbs, small comforts that reminded her of home. By the time they reached the checkout lanes, Adam was humming happily, balancing the apple on his head like a crown. Amina couldn't help but laugh. For a moment, she forgot the stares, the whispers, the loneliness. For a moment, she was just a mother with her son. But then they turned into lane 7. The man was already there, unloading his groceries onto the conveyor belt. Broad shoulders, sunburned neck, baseball cap pulled low. When his eyes met Amina's, something hardened in his face. Adam climbed onto the little platform near the candy rack, still humming, still innocent. Amina began placing her items onto the belt. She could feel the man's stare, sharp, unrelenting. And then he spoke. It was not a whisper. It was not a mutter. It was a shot fired into the air, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Why don't you go back to where you came from?" The words hung heavy in the air, heavier than the weight of the groceries between them. Adam froze, his apple tumbling from his hand and rolling across the shiny floor. The cashier blinked, her fingers hovering above the scanner, unsure what to do. Amina inhaled slowly. She felt the old silence pressing in on her again, the silence she had carried for years. But this time, it was different. This time, her son's wide eyes were staring up at her, waiting to see how his mother would respond. The man stepped closer, his voice rising. "You people come here. You take, and take, and take. And then you dress like that, like some terrorist. You disgust me." Murmurs rippled through the checkout lanes. A teenager lifted his phone, recording. A woman near the gum rack whispered, "Just ignore him." But Adam tugged at Amina's sleeve, his small voice trembling. "Mama, let's go. Please." Amina placed her hand gently on his shoulder. She bent slightly, her lips close to his ear. "It's okay, my son," she whispered. Her voice was steady, calm. But her eyes held a decision. Something was about to happen. The silence in the supermarket did not arrive all at once. It seeped in gradually, like fog rolling across an empty street. At first, there was only the man's voice, loud and cutting, slicing through the usual hum of shopping carts and beeping registers. But soon, even those ordinary sounds seemed to retreat, replaced by an air so heavy it felt as though the entire store were holding its breath. "Why don't you go back to where you came from?" The man barked again. His voice had the coarse rasp of someone who smoked too many cigarettes, every syllable dripping with venom. Amina stood frozen in front of the conveyor belt, her hands resting lightly on the cart handle. Beside her, Adam's little fingers clutched the sleeve of her abaya, his knuckles white. His apple, the one he had chosen so carefully just minutes earlier, had slipped from his hand and now rolled gently along the tile floor until it bumped against a display of candy bars. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, his baseball cap casting a shadow over his weathered face. He smelled faintly of sweat and beer, and his eyes burned with something deeper than mere anger. Something practiced, something that had been simmering for years, waiting for a moment like this. "You people," he spat, gesturing toward her hijab as though it were an offense in itself. "You come here, you live off our taxes, you breed terrorists, and then you act like you belong." A murmur rippled through the checkout lanes. Some shoppers turned away, pretending to study magazines or gum packets, but their ears remained tilted toward the scene. Others stared openly, phones in hand, already angling their cameras for the best shot. The dull red light of recording devices began to blink in the corners of Amina's vision. The cashier, a young woman with freckles and a nervous tremor in her hands, froze mid-scan. The box of cereal she held hovered above the register as if suspended in air. Her lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. Adam tugged at his mother's sleeve, his voice no more than a fragile thread. "Mama, let's go home. Please." His words stabbed into Amina's heart. Every instinct screamed at her to gather him up, abandon the cart, and flee. but her feet refused to move. She could feel the eyes of the crowd pressing against her back, weighing her down. To walk away now would mean teaching her son that silence was the only answer to hatred. She bent low, her face close to Adam's, brushing her fingers through his dark hair. "Shoo, Habibi," she whispered. "I am here. I will protect you." When she straightened again, her gaze locked with the man's. He sneered, mistaking her composure for weakness. "What's the matter?" he jeered. "Cat got your tongue? Or maybe you don't even speak English. Do you? You come here and expect us to bend to your ways. Well, not me. Not today." The muscles in his neck strained as he stepped closer, his voice rising with each accusation. "You disgust me. You people disgust me. Hiding behind your scarves, pretending you're so holy. Everyone knows what you really are. Everyone knows what your kind does." The silence deepened. Somewhere in the store, a child began crying, but his mother quickly wheeled him away. An elderly man near the gum rack shook his head, muttering something about freedom of speech, though he made no move to intervene. The teenagers by the soda fridge, the same ones who had mocked Amina earlier, now held their phones high, their smirks gone, replaced by wide-eyed fascination. For them, this was entertainment, another viral video in the making. Amina's pulse thundered in her ears, but outwardly she remained still. She had endured years of these small cuts, sideways glances, whispered insults, the occasional slur hurled from a passing car. But this was different. This was a knife pressed against her dignity, in front of her child, in front of strangers who would decide, by their silence, whether she was human in their eyes. She inhaled slowly, her chest rising and falling with deliberate calm. Inside, memories surged unbidden. She remembered the night she fled Damascus, clutching baby Adam in her arms as bombs shattered the sky. She remembered the interviews with immigration officers, the endless suspicion in their eyes. She remembered the first time a neighbor refused to ride the elevator with her because of the scarf she wore. And now this. The man leaned closer still, his breath hot and sour. "Answer me," he roared. "What are you doing here, dressed like that? You trying to scare people? You trying to spread your poison in our country?" "Sir." The cashier's voice quivered, almost inaudible. "Please, maybe you should. Don't tell me what to do," he snapped, spinning toward her. "I have every right to say this. This is America. You hear me? America." The word echoed off the tiled floor and fluorescent lights, sharp and hollow. Some nodded faintly, as if cowed by his certainty. Others looked down, ashamed but silent. Amina's hand slid slowly from the cart to her purse. Her fingers brushed the worn leather, the familiar texture grounding her in reality. She could feel Adam trembling beside her, could hear his shallow breaths. His little voice broke again. "Mama, I'm scared." Her throat tightened. She wanted to tell him that everything would be fine, that people were kinder than this, that America was a place where dignity could survive. But the words would have been a lie. So instead, she bent once more, pressing her forehead briefly against his. "It's okay, my son," she whispered, though her own heart trembled. When she stood again, her eyes burned, not with hatred, but with resolve. The man towered over her, expecting fear, expecting retreat. Instead, she reached calmly into her purse and pulled out her wallet. The motion was small, almost imperceptible at first, but in the electric silence of the supermarket, it was louder than a shout. The crowd leaned forward. Phones adjusted their angles. The man's face twitched with confusion, his fury momentarily interrupted. "What are you doing?" he demanded, suspicion lacing his tone. Amina did not answer. She slid the wallet onto the counter, her hands steady now. The cashier blinked, her freckles standing out stark against her pale skin. "Ma'am?" the cashier asked softly. "Do you need something?" Amina's voice came at last, low but clear, carrying the strength of someone who had learned long ago that silence could also be power. "I will pay for his groceries." The words hung in the air, impossible, unbelievable. The silence broke not with noise, but with stillness, the kind of stillness that comes when an entire room forgets how to breathe. The man's jaw dropped. "What?" he sputtered. "No, you can't." But Amina repeated herself, her gaze unwavering. "I will pay. For everything in his cart." Gasps rippled through the crowd. A woman near the candy rack clasped her hands to her mouth. The teenagers by the soda fridge exchanged shocked glances, their phones still recording, but their expressions transformed. The cashier hesitated, looking from Amina to the man, unsure. Her hand hovered above the register like a question mark. The man's face flushed crimson. He shook his head violently. I don't need your charity. Especially not from. He choked on the word he wanted to use, his eyes darting toward the cameras. You don't need it, Amina said softly, but I choose to give it. Her voice did not waver. Because hate cannot drive out hate. Her words landed like a stone cast into still water, sending ripples through the silent crowd. The cashier, almost mechanically, reached for the man's groceries. The scanner beeped once, twice, again and again. Milk, bread, eggs, frozen meals. With each sound, the silence deepened, pressing on every chest. The man stood rigid, his fists clenched, his mouth working soundlessly. For the first time, he had no words. Adam clung to his mother, his eyes wide, watching something he did not yet fully understand. The total flashed on the screen. Amina slid her card across the counter. The beep confirmed the purchase. Paid in full. The cashier whispered, almost reverently. And with that, the silence shattered, not with noise, but with the weight of what had just been witnessed. Paid in full. The cashier whispered, almost reverently. No one moved. It felt as though the fluorescent lights above had hardened into spears of cold glass, pinning every person in place. The register's screen glowed with numbers that suddenly meant something larger than a receipt. It meant that a line had been crossed. No, reversed. The script had been rewritten right there between the candy bars and the lottery tickets. Amina's hand hovered a fraction above the counter before she let it fall to her side. She didn't look triumphant. She didn't even look relieved. There was something softer in her face, something fragile, like a candle wick just after it has been snuffed, smoke rising, warmth lingering, the room still remembering the light. Adam, who had been pressed into her hip so tightly his small fingers had gone numb, loosened his grip. He peered out from behind his mother's abaya, blinking as if he'd surfaced from deep water and needed to recollect the world. His eyes traced the outline of the man's card. Milk, bread, cereal, ordinary things that suddenly looked like artifacts from a different life. Somewhere in the back, the ice machine's compressor kicked on with a rattle. The sound felt too loud, vulgar even, as if the mechanics of the store should have known to keep their voice down during a sacred moment. The cashier, her name tag read Lily, swallowed hard. Her freckles seemed to bloom on her cheeks. She had been training herself to be neutral, to be efficient, to be the kind of person who rang up groceries and did not get pulled into other people's storms. And yet here she was, trembling with the effort of just standing, feeling like she'd watched a person step out of a burning building and hand their rescuer a glass of water. The man, baseball cap, sunburned neck, stared at the bags as if they had been filled with bricks instead of bread. His face, ruddy, creased at the eyes, held an expression that didn't fit on it, like clothing a size too small. Shame. He had not planned for this. He had planned for a fight. He had come armed with words sharpened by years of fear he mistook for patriotism. He had expected her to crack, to run, to rage. He had not expected mercy. From the magazine rack to the soda fridge, the phones kept rolling. The red recording lights blinked their indifferent blinks. They had captured his words, raw and undeniable. Now they had captured hers, quiet and impossible. The videos would leave this room and arrive in rooms he would never enter. His own voice would echo back at him from the screens of strangers. Sir, Lily managed, her voice still threaded with satin-soft apprehension. Would you like your receipt? It was the smallest question, offered like a rope thrown toward someone adrift. The man, Hank, his name could have been, or Earl, or Tom. Whatever his name was, he flinched. His eyes flicked toward Lily, then toward Amina, then down to Adam, who was watching him with that unfiltered gaze children had, equal parts fear and wonder. I don't need, he started, then stopped. His voice had lost altitude, as if some essential engine had stalled. He didn't reach for the receipt. He didn't reach for his wallet. He just stood, fists relaxing by degrees, as if they'd forgotten how to be hands. A cough sounded from 3 carts back. A woman with a toddler on her hip cleared her throat and said, to no one and everyone, let the lady go first. She shifted her weight. The child, uncertain, tucked his face into her shoulder. The woman's eyes shone with something complicated, guilt, maybe, for not speaking sooner, gratitude, Definitely. For not being asked to carry any more silence. Yeah, a teenage boy near the soda fridge muttered, lower now, his earlier smirk replaced by a stiff seriousness. He lowered his phone a fraction. Let her go. The crowd rearranged itself in small gestures. Someone nudged a cart forward. Someone else pulled a basket aside. A path opened, delicate at first, then clear. It was a choreography that didn't require a conductor. The human body knows how to move when it has finally decided to be decent. Amina didn't step forward immediately. She looked at the man again, not with triumph, not with a lesson packaged and ready to deliver, but with a complicated gentleness that made him want to stare at the floor. She thought, suddenly and irrationally, that his sunburn must sting when he showered. She wondered, fleetingly, if he had a daughter, if he had ever laughed so hard he cried, if he had ever cried so hard he laughed. Her father's voice threaded the air in her memory, Damascus drifting in like a scent. When someone hands you their anger, Habibti, do not carry it home. Put it down. Carry something lighter. She had thought of that sentence each time a stranger's mouth had made her small. Today, she had set the weight down where everyone could see it. Ma'am, Lily said again, more certain. Would you like me to? She gestured at Amina's card, a question in the arc of her hand. Amina nodded. Her lips parted, but the words stalled, pinned beneath the heaviness of the moment. She wanted to say, thank you. She wanted to say, I'm fine. What came out was simply yes. Lily began to scan Amina's groceries. Beep, beep, milk, eggs, lentils, rice, apple juice. The ordinary song of a life threading itself back together. Each beep seemed to stitch the air closed, one neat seam at a time. Behind Amina, the store manager appeared, tie loosened, keys jangling, the cautious gait of someone who had walked into many conflicts and solved none cleanly. His name tag read Calhoun. He took in the scene in a series of sun-bleached snapshots. The man with the cap, the woman in the hijab, the boy, the glowing phones. Lily's hands shaking just enough to make the cereal boxes wobble. Calhoun had a policy manual for everything except this. Is everything, all right here? Calhoun asked, which was the kind of question people asked when things were obviously not all right. But they were hoping the answer would give them permission to pretend. Amina turned to him. We're all right, she said. And in a way that surprised even her, she meant it. Not because the world had changed, not because her rent was paid, not because her son would never be cruelly questioned again, but because she had chosen how to stand inside the world's weather. Today, her spine had remembered the shape it took before fear made it bend. Calhoun nodded, relieved at being granted an exit. If you need anything, he offered, helplessly helpful, I'll be right over there. He pointed toward the office as though the direction could be useful. From the gum rack, an elderly black woman in a lavender cardigan eased her cart forward until she was level with Amina. Her eyes were warm and wet. Baby, she murmured, voice low enough that only Amina could hear. You did good. She reached out, a hand hovering in midair. Amina placed her fingers in the offered palm and squeezed. The touch lasted less than a second, but Amina felt it soak into her bones as if she'd swallowed sunshine. The teenagers by the sodas, disarmed, looked at each other as if trying to decode what being human required. One of them, corn silk hair, an acne constellation across his cheek, cleared his throat. Ma'am, he said, stumbling over the word as if it were a language he'd just started learning. I'm sorry for earlier. He didn't specify what earlier meant. He didn't have to. The apology sat between them like something fragile and shy. Amina gave the smallest nod, and the boy looked relieved, as though he'd passed a test he hadn't studied for. The man in the cap still hadn't moved. He was experiencing, perhaps for the first time in years, the slow collapse of a scaffolding he'd been living on. He had constructed his certainty piece by piece, beam by beam, stories he'd been told, headlines he'd half-read, talk radio filling the cab of his truck on long drives home. It had felt good to be angry. Anger was a heat source in a cold life. But mercy is a kind of weather, too. It can make a person realize how numb they've become. His mind tripped backward through a life he had not planned to revisit today. The time his daughter, he did have one, her name was Emily, had come home from school crying because a boy called her poor. The way he'd held her and told her that some people get taught the wrong things and never get untaught. The time his wife, Marie, had left a bag of groceries on their neighbor's porch because she'd heard the baby crying through thin apartment walls. He'd been proud of Marie that night. He had told her she had a good heart. He had kissed her temple and breathed her in, the scent of flour and dish soap. What am I doing here? He wondered, the question not about geography anymore. Sir. Lily tried again, a little braver. Do you want me to help load your bags? He blinked, surprised to be addressed. He looked down at the handles of the paper bags, the neat creases, the tops folded once. He felt, absurdly, like if he touched them wrong they would disintegrate and spill everything. No, he said hoarsely. Then, softer, in a voice that fit him better, thank you. Amina gathered Adam's apple from where it had rolled beneath the candy display. She rubbed the waxy skin with the hem of her abaya until it shone again. She crouched and pressed it into Adam's palm. Still red like Iron Man, she whispered. Adam smiled, small and wobbly but real. Like Iron Man, he echoed. A woman with a pixie haircut near the self-checkout finally found her voice. Hey, she called, aiming her words vaguely toward the manager, toward the man, toward the air. The store has a code of conduct, right? About harassment? Her tone suggested she was ready to deputize herself if the store wouldn't. Calhoun straightened his tie by instinct. We do, he said, because of course they did. The binder in the office had tabs and everything. We don't tolerate harassment. He glanced at the man in the cap. Sir, I'm going to ask you to keep your comments respectful, or I'll have to. He didn't know how to finish the sentence without escalating, and he desperately wanted to keep this moment from flaring into something uglier. It's done, Amina said softly, rescuing him. She nodded toward the bags. It's done. Lily's scanner sang its last beep. She tore the receipt and held it out to Amina. Would you like your receipt? She asked, and then, as if correcting herself. I mean, yes, of course, sorry. She trailed off, cheeks flushing. Amina took the receipt, folding it once, then once again, as if diminishing the physical evidence could also shrink the vastness of the moment. She slid it into her wallet, next to a faded photograph of her parents standing in front of a lemon tree that no longer existed. Thank you, Lily, Amina said, reading the name tag aloud. Gratitude made Lily's spine lengthen. Later, on her break, Lily would stare at the vending machine and realize her hands had stopped shaking. She would text her sister, something happened at work. She would not know how to put it into a single message. She would write, I think I saw courage. Then she would erase it and type, I think I saw grace. Then she would erase that, too, and decide that some things were better kept whole inside the body. The teenager's phones dipped further. One of them, the tallest, ended his recording. Dude, he murmured to his friend, don't post the guy's face. He surprised himself with the suggestion. He didn't know why he'd made it. Instinct, maybe, a sudden understanding that justice without mercy curdles into a spectacle. His friend shrugged, uncertain. The red light blinked on, then off, then on again. From somewhere in the cereal aisle, a cart squeaked. Life, impatient, pushed its way back in. The impatience of people who still needed to get home and make dinner, who still needed to pick up prescriptions, who still had places to be and burdens to carry. But even as the motion restarted, a hush remained, like the echo after a bell. The man in the cap, Hank, Earl, Tom, scrubbed a hand over his jaw, stubbled and tense. He found his voice, quiet this time, as if addressing not the crowd, not even Amina, but the part of him that had longed to hear something better. He stopped. The words were treacherous, the floor uneven. He looked at Amina. In her eyes, he did not see victory. He saw a question he didn't know how to answer. Who will you be now? Ma'am, he said finally, and the syllables seemed to cost him, not because it was hard, but because it required him to place himself below the person he'd tried to stand above. I didn't. I was just, he exhaled, a sound like tires deflating. I'm sorry. The apology was small, unadorned. It was not a speech. It was not absolution. It didn't undo anything. But it was true. You could tell because it wobbled in the air, uncertain on its feet. Amina didn't rush to fill the space. She had learned that silence could be a kindness if you let it cradle a fragile thing instead of crush it. She nodded once, a movement that said, I heard you. It did not say more. Forgiveness, when it came, would be a door she opened for herself, not one he demanded to be let through. A man in a faded UT baseball tee, Miguel, as his name would later appear in a comment thread, took a step forward. "Hey," he said, addressing the space generally. "We all got kids here." He gestured toward Adam, toward the toddler, toward the teenagers who were still just someone's children in larger shoes. "Maybe we try to be the kind of people we'd want them to learn from." It wasn't eloquent, but it was enough. The sentence threaded itself through the room like twine, giving everyone something to hold. Amina loaded her groceries into her cart. Adam insisted on helping, puffing with purpose as he set the apple on top of the bread, carefully, like a crown he didn't want to dent. She whispered something to him in Arabic, soft, lilting, a cradle song tucked inside a grocery list. He nodded, solemn, the kind of nod children give when they understand they are being entrusted with a grown-up thing. Lily, still learning how to be in her own body after the adrenaline, reached into a plastic bag and pulled out a small roll of stickers. "We give these to kids sometimes," she said, offering Adam one shaped like a smiling lemon. "For being brave at the register." Adam took the sticker like it was a medal pinned on a soldier. "Thank you," he whispered. "You're welcome," Lily said, and the words steadied her. She smiled. It fit. Calhoun hovered at the edge of the scene, trying to appear as though he had orchestrated an ending he had merely witnessed. If anyone needs water," he said, gesturing toward the employee break room as though it were a chapel, "we have some." No one moved toward it, but the offer landed like a clean towel laid over a mess. From above the sliding doors, the black dome of the security camera watched, unblinking. If it could have sighed, it would have. It had seen men steal and boys dare each other to stuff candy into their socks. It had seen couples fight and cashiers cry in the long, fluorescent night. It had never seen this. Amina rested both hands on the cart handle. She stood straight, not in defiance, not in pride, but in something simpler and sturdier, dignity reclaimed. She looked at the man one last time and spoke in a voice that could have been mistaken for a prayer, if not for how practical it was. "May peace be upon you," she said. The words lifted and settled. A hush answered them, quiet as a blanket. The man nodded once, barely, as if agreeing to carry a small parcel he did not yet understand. Amina turned the cart. The crowd that had once felt like a wall shifted like a gate. They made space for her. Here, a basket pulled in close. There, a cart backed up an inch. This choreography of courtesy, so easy and so rare, opened, and Amina and Adam stepped into it. Adam looked back over his shoulder. The man in the cap was staring at the floor. Lily was staring at Amina. The teenagers were staring at each other, as if translating a lesson from a language they'd always heard but never spoken. The elderly woman in lavender pressed a hand to her chest. Calhoun exhaled. As they moved toward the exit, the store's intercom crackled. For a second, everyone flinched, expecting an announcement that would name what had just happened and fold it into company policy. But it was only the usual. "Price check on aisle 4. The banality jarred and soothed at once. The world, impolite to epiphanies, carried on. The automatic doors sighed open. The Texas heat reached in and touched their faces, humid and honest. The smell of tar and sun and sky rolled over them. Adam squinted into the light. On the sidewalk outside, a shopping cart with a wobbly wheel rattled past, pushed by a teenage employee with earbuds in, blissfully unaware of how large the world had just been inside. Amina halted just short of the threshold. She wasn't leaving yet. Not quite. She knew that if she walked out now, the ending would belong to the cameras. She wanted Adam to have a different ending, one that lived in his body, not in someone's comment section. She crouched so that her eyes were level with his. The white-blue light from outside haloed his curls. He held his lemon sticker to his shirt with a concentration that made his tongue peek out between his teeth. "Habibi," she said, "what did you see?" Adam blinked. His gaze drifted past her shoulder, back to the register, back to the man and the bagged groceries and Lily's small hands and the red lights that had winked like little eyes. He took a breath and said, "You were kind." Amina smiled, not because the answer was simple, but because it was whole. "I tried," she said. "Sometimes we can't fix people's hearts, but we can decide what lives in ours." Adam nodded, the kind of nod that marked a person, even a small one. "I want to have kind," he announced, patting his chest once. "You do," Amina said, and kissed his forehead. He giggled and wiped at the spot, then, reconsidering, patted it as if to push the kiss in deeper. Behind them, Voices resumed. A cart wheeled. A register beeped. Lily answered a question about coupons. Calhoun pretended to check an end cap display. The world clicked back into its familiar gears, but the teeth of those gears had been filed just a little smoother. Amina straightened. For a heartbeat, she let her eyes rise to the lens of the security camera. She imagined the footage, the wide angle, the odd fisheye, the way humanity looked both small and immense when captured from above. She wondered who would see it. She wondered what stories they would carry into the comments. She wondered whether mercy traveled well across glass. Then she looked away from the lens and down to her son. The decision settled. The ending, for today, would be his. Ready? She asked. Ready, he said, his lemon sticker catching a square of sunlight and flashing like a badge. They stepped forward. The doors breathed them out into the heat. Inside, the man in the cap finally gathered his bags. He fumbled with the handles, then got them, one in each hand, a third hooked over his wrist. He felt their weight. He suspected they would feel heavy until he found a way to carry something else, too. As he turned, he caught sight of his reflection in the darkened freezer glass. Cap, neck, the lines at his mouth he'd stopped noticing years ago. He didn't like it. He didn't look like the man he told himself he was. He felt a strange, clean grief for the minutes he had lost to his own worst self. He walked to the door. The elderly woman in lavender stepped aside to let him pass. He paused. Ma'am, he said to her, because the syllable had come easier the second time. Have a nice day. It was nothing, and it was something. You too, she replied, because dignity is a renewable resource if you tend it. He emerged into the sun a few paces behind Amina. He did not call out. He did not ask for one more moment. He stood and watched for a second as she buckled her son into the cart's shallow seat, as she tucked the receipt into her wallet, as she did all the small mechanics of carrying on. Then he turned toward the parking lot, toward a truck that needed gas and a dog that needed walking and a life that, he was suddenly aware, needed mending. Back at Register 7, Lily exhaled and pressed the next customer button. The conveyor belt hummed and moved, a black river carrying boxes and bottles and bananas. A woman placed a bouquet of supermarket flowers on it, their petals neon against all the beige. When Lily scanned them, the register chirped, and on impulse she tapped another key. Hey, the woman said, surprised. That rang up half off. Manager's special, Lily said, inventing it on the spot. Today only. The woman smiled, and Lily smiled back, and somewhere a thread tightened. The good kind, the kind that pulls a tear through fabric. By the door, Miguel pushed his cart and texted his wife, running late. Something happened. We'll tell you at dinner. He did not add, I think I saw the person I want our kids to think I am. He would try those words later, out loud, at the table, and he would stumble and his wife would reach across the plates and squeeze his hand and say, I know. In the cereal aisle, the teenagers huddled, editing their footage. Cut the part where we laughed, one said, and the others nodded. They didn't erase themselves from the story. There was value in remembering who they had been at the beginning so they could be different at the end, but they tried, for once, to be responsible narrators. Calhoun returned to his office and closed the door. He sat on the edge of the desk and stared at the binder labeled customer incidents. After a minute, he took out a pad and wrote, staff training, de-escalation plus compassion, real scripts. He underlined real twice. He wasn't sure what he would say at the meeting, but he knew the old sentences would not do. And the camera above the door kept watching the doors open and close, like lungs breathing. At the curb, Amina took her first step toward the parking lot and felt her heel wobble on a crack in the concrete. She steadied. It made her laugh, small and genuine. Her life, even the heroic moments, would never be free of such small stumbles. Maybe that was the point. The heroism wasn't in the grand gesture, but in the next step, and then the one after that. She turned the cart. Adam hummed something under his breath, an invented tune with no words, or words he hadn't learned yet. The sun laid a gold line across his cheek. He looked very much like a boy and very much like the person who might one day tell this story to someone else and say, this is how my mother walked through the world. Behind them, at the threshold of the automatic doors, the man in the cap hesitated. He looked once toward Amina's back, opened his mouth, closed it, and then, without quite knowing why, he pulled his cap off his head. He held it at his side for a second, eyes on the sun. Then he put it back on, brim lower, a man newly shy in his own skin, and he stepped into the heat to meet the work of being different. Inside, the store's soundtrack, a playlist of pop songs no one had chosen, crept back up. A chorus about forgiveness drifted over the registers in that oblivious way music has. A cashier at Lane 9 started to sing along without noticing. The world did what it always does, continued. But anyone who had been standing near Lane 7 would later admit that something else had continued, too. Some steady thread quietly spooling out, tying people together who had not known they'd needed tying. Lily tore a spare receipt, and, on the back, wrote a single sentence. She folded it twice and tucked it into the pocket of her apron. She didn't know if she would ever give it to anyone. She just wanted to practice writing the world she hoped to live in. Kindness is not weakness, she had written. It's instruction. Amina reached the car. She unlocked it and slid the groceries onto the back seat. Adam, solemn again, watched her with the concentration of someone watching a ritual. She handed him the lemon sticker sheet's backing, and he crumpled it and laughed at the crackle sound. She looked at him and decided this was the moment she would remember, not the stranger's words, not the eyes, not the heat of shame turned toward her. This, his laughter in Texas light. This, the apple unbruised. This, the next breath arriving without being asked. Ready to go home? She asked. Home, he echoed. Amina buckled him in, closed the door, and stood for a second with her hand on the metal, feeling the vibration of the world humming through it. The traffic on the road beyond the lot, the cicadas in the trees, the far-off siren, the present tense of it all. She took a breath that tasted like asphalt and sky. Back inside, the crowd had thinned. The story, as they would all learn soon enough, had not. It was already leaping from screen to screen, humming through timelines, threaded with captions that would both honor and flatten it. Some would say, this is what America should be. Some would say, this is performative. Some would say, saint. Some would say, naive. The truth, as it often does, would live in the untidy middle. A woman had chosen a path through a hard moment. A man had seen himself clearly for a breath. A boy had learned a definition of strength that would not require him to break anything to prove it. But that was tomorrow's work. Tonight's work was gentler. Get the groceries home without the eggs breaking. Rinse the rice until the water ran clear. Press a kiss into a boy's hair while he fell asleep. Place the receipt in a drawer. Let the heart find its normal speed again. Amina slid into the driver's seat. She adjusted the mirror. In its rectangle, she saw her eyes, and in them, for a second, the girl who had run under a Damascus sun and learned, over and over, the names of endurance. She smiled at her reflection. It smiled back, tired and fierce. Bismillah, she said softly, and turned the key. The engine caught. The air conditioner coughed. The heat pressed and receded in waves. She pulled the car into gear and eased out of the space. As she passed the front of the store, the automatic doors opened one more time, and the man in the cap stepped out, his bags swinging gently. He looked up, and their eyes met through glass and glare and distance. He lifted a hand, awkward, uncertain, a signal without an agreed-upon meaning. She inclined her head. It was enough. She turned onto the road. Behind her, Lane 7 reset to 0. And somewhere, on a server that would never know the smell of sun-warmed asphalt or the sound of a child's humming, a video began to upload. The store had not breathed since the register announced, paid in full. It was as if the fluorescent lights themselves had frozen mid-flicker, as if the air between the aisles had thickened into glass. Amina stood with her purse closed again, her son pressed close to her hip, and the man who had shouted himself red stared at the brown paper bags filled with his own groceries. He looked as though the bags were filled with fire instead of food, as if touching them might burn the story deeper into his skin. No one moved. The hum of the refrigerators grew louder. The small hiss of the soda machine punctuated the silence, but the humans in the store had forgotten the choreography of daily life. It was as if every pair of lungs in the building had decided to hold still, suspended in disbelief. Amina did not look proud. She did not look defeated either. Her face was calm, her lips curved in a line neither smile nor frown, her eyes reflecting something more complicated than anyone around could interpret. She had done what she believed she had to do. Not because the man deserved it. Not because the crowd would praise her for it. But because Adam had been watching. Her son, her 6-year-old boy with wide eyes and trembling hands, had witnessed every second of this confrontation. In his young mind, everything was a lesson. Every action a building block for who he would one day become. She could not let him learn that hate was answered with hate. She could not let him believe that fear demanded retreat. And so she had chosen. She had lifted her card, she had pressed it to the machine, and she had paid for the groceries of the man who despised her. Adam's little fingers dug into her abaya, but his eyes, still wet, were fixed on her face. He whispered, barely loud enough for her to hear, "Mama, why?" His voice was cracked, confused. His world was too small to understand mercy. All he knew was fear and protection, enemies and safety. He could not yet grasp the paradox of giving to someone who tried to take from you. But he would. She had planted the seed. Someday, it would bloom in him. The man, Robert, though no one in the store knew his name, opened his mouth. His lips were chapped, his voice strained, but the words stuck in his throat. He had expected her to cry, to shout, to leave in shame. He had prepared his lines the way a soldier polishes a gun. But she had torn the script to shreds with an act so alien he could not even find the first syllable to answer it. His hand twitched at his side, a fist that wanted to clench but found no target. He stared at her hijab, at her son, at the cashier who was staring at him with undisguised horror. He looked at the phones held up like tiny, glowing judges. And he felt something that had not lived inside him for years. Shame, raw and corrosive. I don't, his voice cracked. He swallowed hard. Why would you do that? Amina's eyes turned to him, steady as stone. Her voice was quiet, but it carried through the aisle with the gravity of something ancient. Because my son is watching. It was not a rebuke. It was not forgiveness. It was simply truth. And it landed in Robert's chest like a stone dropped in deep water. He thought of his own daughter, 12 years old, with braces and a laugh that used to fill their kitchen. He thought of how he had told her, after a cruel boy called her poor, that she must never let someone else's words decide who she was. He thought of that advice, so neatly given, and realized he had betrayed it today, in front of a crowd, in front of his own conscience. The crowd, until now frozen, began to stir. A woman near the gum rack whispered, "Did you see what she did?" Her voice shook. Another shopper, a man with suspenders and gray hair, muttered, "She's braver than all of us put together." The teenagers who had been recording lowered their phones, their smirks long gone. One of them whispered, "Dude, I feel like crap." Another responded, "Don't post it yet. Just, think about it first." For the first time that day, their words carried weight instead of mockery. The cashier, Lily, tried to find her voice. She had been trembling since the first insult rang across the lane, her freckles standing stark against her pale face. Now she finally spoke, her voice cracked but sincere. "Ma'am, thank you." It was all she could manage. Gratitude for showing her something different, something she didn't know people could do in the face of cruelty. Amina inclined her head gently, acknowledging the words but not owning them. She had not done it for gratitude. She had done it for Adam. The silence stretched again, but this time it was different. Not heavy with fear. Heavy with awe, with the strange, uncomfortable knowledge that they had all witnessed something that would outlast this fluorescent-lit room. For a moment, no one cared about groceries, about coupons, about time. They were suspended together in the realization that an ordinary errand had turned into a story they would tell again and again. Robert's shoulders sagged. His red face softened, the fury dissolving into something broken. He looked at Amina again, at the small boy clutching her, at the bags of food he hadn't paid for. His lips moved. His voice was rough. I'm sorry," he said. The words stumbled, incomplete, but they were real. "I didn't mean. I don't know what I meant. I'm sorry." Some in the crowd nodded as if that tied the bow neatly, as if apology was enough to erase venom. Others frowned, suspicious of how quickly he sought release. Amina said nothing for a long moment. Then she inclined her head slightly and spoke words older than the supermarket, older than the nation, older than Robert's anger. "Peace be upon you." The hush that followed was even deeper than before. She had not said, "I forgive you." She had not said, "We are even." She had said something simpler, harder, more unyielding. "Peace be upon you. Whether you deserve it or not." whether you carry it or not. May it be near you. Robert lowered his eyes. He could not hold her gaze. His mouth opened as if to speak again, but no sound came. For the first time that day, he looked small. The crowd began to shift, as if waking from a trance. People moved carts aside, made space. The path to the sliding doors opened without anyone directing it. A mother with a toddler whispered, "Let her go first." A man nodded silently. The choreography of ordinary courtesy, so often forgotten, returned. Amina placed her hand on Adam's back. "Come, Habibi," she whispered. He clutched the apple he had chosen earlier, pressing it to his chest like a shield. Together, they walked forward. The automatic doors waited, their glass reflecting the store's bright innards, their frames humming with the electricity of transition. The crowd parted around them. Phones lowered. People stared not at a hijab, not at a scarf, not at a stranger, but at a woman who had stood in dignity when it would have been easier to break. As they reached the threshold, Adam tugged at her sleeve again. His voice was small, but determined. "Mama, will people stop hating us now?" The question cut through her chest. She paused, looking out at the blinding Texas sunlight, at the cars glittering in the lot, at the wide sky that never seemed to end. She exhaled, "Steady. One day, my son. And until that day, we will keep walking." The doors sighed open. Heat spilled in. Light wrapped around them. Mother and son stepped out together, carrying their groceries, carrying their lesson, carrying the weight of what had just happened. Behind them, the supermarket exhaled too. Conversations erupted again, nervous and reverent. Someone whispered, "That was incredible." Someone else muttered, "I should have said something sooner." The teenagers debated what to do with their footage. The cashier wiped her eyes and scanned the next customer's items with hands still shaking. Robert stood alone at the register, staring at the receipt that wasn't his, at the bags filled by a stranger's generosity. He felt the stares pressing into his back. He felt the silence of his own daughter waiting at home, the silence that would ask questions he was not yet ready to answer. He picked up the bag slowly, each one heavier than it should have been. His reflection in the glossy tiles looked back at him, smaller, diminished, uncertain. Above the entrance, the small black dome of a security camera blinked, recording everything. Its lens had no opinion, no bias, no shame. But the world beyond that lens would. The video would escape these walls, ripple outward, and demand that millions of strangers decide what they had seen. Weakness or strength, foolishness or grace, surrender or defiance. Inside, the store returned to its rhythms, scanners beeping, carts squeaking, coins rattling into registers. But for those who had stood in Lane 7, groceries would never again be just groceries. They had witnessed a moment when hatred had been met not with more hatred, but with something harder, something rarer, kindness that demanded nothing in return. And it left a taste in their mouths, strange, bitter, sweet, that they would never forget. For Amina, the story was already over. She had walked her son into the sun. She had carried herself with dignity. She had shown him, and the world, what strength could look like. And that was enough. By the time Amina pulled into the gravel-scarred lot behind her apartment building, the sun had slid down into a softer gold, and the shadows of the stair railings striped the concrete like piano keys. She killed the engine and let the quiet settle. Adam had fallen asleep mid-sentence, his head tilted toward the window, the lemon sticker wrinkled but proud on his shirt. The air conditioning ticked as it cooled. Somewhere beyond the fence, a dog barked as if remembering old grievances. Amina touched Adam's hair with 2 fingers, then eased herself out of the car and began ferrying bags upstairs in 2 trips, careful with the eggs, careful with her thoughts. On the 3rd trip, she woke Adam gently, carried him as far as the first landing before he wriggled free, insisting he could climb by himself, Mama, like a mountain. She smiled and let him. Inside, she rinsed rice until the water ran clear and the day loosened its grip on her shoulders. The storm didn't arrive with thunder. It arrived as a small glass rectangle buzzing on the counter. At first, it was Lily. A text from an unknown number. "Hi, it's Lily from the store. I found your name on the receipt you gave me when you left your loyalty card. I wanted to say, I'm still thinking about what you did. I hope you and your son got home safe." Amina read it twice, touched by the gentleness. She set the phone down and stirred the lentils. Then, ping ping. The sounds braided themselves into the kitchen's soundtrack. Rice simmering, Adam chattering sleepily on the couch about Iron Man, the faucet's small tisk-tisk. A college student Amina had tutored last summer wrote, "Ms. Amina? Is this you in a video?" A neighbor wrote, "Are you okay?" The mosque's group chat bloomed. "Sister Amina, we're proud of you, and please be careful," and a dozen variations on Allahu Akbar, praise sent on soft, vibrating wings. She ignored the links at first. She had no space for the outside world's angles on what had happened in her own bones. She plated rice and lentils, cut apples into eighths, and kissed Adam's hair as he ate, overloud with the triumph of staying awake. After dinner, she and Adam stacked dishes to dry, and she invented a game where each plate was a planet and each cup a moon, and Adam's laughter made the kitchen bigger. The phone buzzed again, a persistent moth. A voice message this time. She pressed play with a thumb stained by turmeric. "Hi, Ms. Amina. I'm Miguel, the guy in the UT shirt from the store today. Sorry this is weird. My wife said I should say what I didn't say there. I'm sorry I didn't speak sooner. Also, one of the kids, teenagers, asked me how to send you their video privately, in case you want it. If you don't want it shared, I'll back you. Anyway, you changed my day. Maybe my year." His voice trembled on year. Amina swallowed, surprised by the heat in her eyes. After she put Adam to bed, 3 books, an extra-long hug, the familiar liturgy of "Mama, will you stay till I sleep? I'll stay till your breath is steady." She returned to the phone. It glowed like a portal. A link from Lily. A shaky, vertical video starting with Robert's voice slicing the aisle. Then the slow miracle of Amina's wallet, the card, Lily's whisper, paid in full, and the hush that followed. It ended on the apple in Adam's hand. The camera lowered, as if embarrassed by its own witnessing. In Amina's stomach, a twist. To watch herself from the outside was to realize how small she looked inside the long, bright store. To hear her voice, low, even, saying "because my son is watching," was to recognize how much of her life had been about building room for him to stand without shrinking. She closed the video and pressed the phone to her chest, as if she could push the heat back into her body. On the other end of town, the teenagers were editing. They trimmed their laughter from the beginning. They cut Robert's face when he flinched and left the sound of his apology intact. They added no music, no captions, no slow zooms, just the fluorescent hum and the stuttering air and the words that had rearranged the day. They uploaded it to an account with a handful of followers, a page usually filled with skateboard tricks and energy drink reviews. The title, "At Lane 7 Today." The description, "We were dumb." She wasn't. The algorithm sniffed something human and turned like a school of fish. The video tripled its views in 10 minutes, multiplied by 10 and 20. In an hour, local Facebook groups were debating whether the store was in Austin or Round Rock, whether the woman at the center was an angel or a fool. A retired teacher wrote a paragraph-long comment that started with "When I was a girl in Alabama," and ended with "We can choose better." A man with a flag in his profile said "This is staged." Someone else replied with a frame-by-frame analysis like a courtroom exhibit, pointing out that the cashier's hands were shaking too much for acting. In a newsroom bathed in blue light, a producer yelled across desks, "Viral kindness thing at a supermarket. Anyone got eyes on the original?" An intern found the teenager's account and DM'd in a shower of emojis. "Hey, can we use your clip with credit?" The intern's supervisor followed up with a second DM, less emojis, more legalese. By midnight, a local station had a 43-second segment with slow B-roll of the supermarket sign and a voiceover saying the words "Muslim woman" and "unexpected" in the same sentence, like flint and steel. They blurred Robert's face. They didn't blur Amina's. They didn't have her name yet. At 12:14 a.m., the clip hit the desk of a national morning show producer who had stayed late to finish a teaser for a segment about airline fees. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Call me when you sleep." She clicked the clip, watched with her mouth open, and slashed the airline fees segment by 30 seconds without guilt. The folder got a tag, 6A, Viral Act of Grace. While all this happened, Amina brushed her teeth, set tomorrow's clothes on a chair, and fell asleep with one hand on Adam's ankle, an old reflex from the months when he woke at every siren. The storm gathered above her roof like a ghostly parade. At 6 a.m., America swiveled toward its screens. A toddler spilled cereal while his mother, late for a shift, paused in the doorway to watch a woman in a navy blue hijab slide her card across a counter. A dentist watched between patients. A security guard watched on mute while the soundless caption paid in full scrolled past. The clip engraved itself on the morning like a notch on a doorframe. People measured themselves against it. A friend of Robert's saw it at a gas station on the tiny TV above the pump. He recognized a shoulder, a stance, a hat, even blurred. He called Robert, who didn't answer. He texted, "Hey man, call me. You okay?" Robert wasn't okay. He had slept in a chair because the bed felt like a stage, and he didn't know his blocking. He looked at the ceiling. The ceiling looked back. He imagined the wave of himself cresting across screens, a version of him that felt true and untrue at once. He brewed coffee and didn't drink it, his stomach a fist. His daughter, Emily, emerged, hair wild, eyes half closed. "Dad?" she asked, and it wasn't "Where's breakfast" or "Can I have money?" It was the kind of dad. That meant I saw it. He nodded. She leaned against the counter. He thought of all the times he had told her to be better than the world. He didn't know how to speak that morning's grammar. They stood together in the kitchen's blue light and practiced breathing. By mid-morning, the mosque's phone had rung so many times the volunteer on desk duty started answering. "Yes, she's okay," before callers could ask anything. Flowers arrived, 2 small bouquets from a grocery store, a potted plant with leaves like green hands. Notes tucked into the wrapping paper read, "Thank you for showing my kids what strength looks like, and I'm Jewish, and you made me cry in my office, and this is the Texas I love." One card had only an apology. "I've been cruel in my mind. I am trying to stop." But the other messages came too. Amina's inbox filled with hate hammered into short, breathless sentences. Slurs dressed up as patriotism. Warnings camouflaged as advice. A direct message that made her lock her front door twice and check the chain. She sat at the kitchen table, the plant's leaves casting soft shadows. She opened a message from a woman named Rachel in Ohio. "My kid asked me why the man was angry at you. I told him the truth. Thank you for making me say it out loud." She opened another from Patriot_1776. "Go back." She closed the app and slid the phone away like a plate of food that had gone bad. Her friend Layla called anyway, barreling past the default greeting. "You don't have to answer anything," Layla said. "Let me be your buffer. I'll set up a new email for press. I'll say you're resting. I'll bring dinner." Layla had a way of making help sound like a job title. Amina could have cried with gratitude. "Resting," Amina repeated, tasting the word. "What a strange idea." "Take it," Layla said. "For a day? For 2. For as long as the internet has a memory." The internet's memory was long and short at once. By lunch, the video had 1 million views across platforms. By mid-afternoon, a thread on a national parenting forum had spilled to 30 pages titled, "What Would You Have Done?" The answers were part confession, part wishful thinking, part indictment. In a corner of the giant machine called Twitter, X now, a letter that looked like a crossroads, people grafted the video onto their causes. "This is what America is about," said one camp, planting a flag. "This is tone policing," said another, pointing out the invisible labor of expecting grace from the targets of cruelty. Amina wasn't reading any of it. Amina was washing lentils again, because Adam loved them twice in a row, and because repetition can be a prayer when your name has been stolen by strangers. But the world came to her door anyway. A news van idled on the street by late afternoon, the satellite dish blooming like some metallic flower. A reporter in a jewel-toned blazer knocked, bright as a parrot. "Ms. Amina?" the reporter asked when the door cracked. "I'm with Channel 4. We'd love to talk." Amina weighed the gravity of the knocker's voice against the quiet of Adam's nap in the next room. She thought of how easily a sentence could be trimmed into a new shape, how the space between kindness and spectacle was measured in syllables. "Not today," she said, voice gentle but unnegotiable. "Please." The reporter tried 3 different ways of saying "we'll be gentle." Amina said 3 different versions of no. After the third, the reporter exhaled and passed a card through the gap. "If you change your mind," she said. "If not, have a peaceful evening." She meant it. The van glided away. At the grocery store, Lily's manager had called a team meeting that looked like every team meeting. Stale donuts. A marker that didn't write, but felt like a threshold. Calhoun cleared his throat. We got noticed." He gestured toward a printout of a news article with Lily's hand visible in a freeze frame. the scanner glowing mid-beep. We need to be prepared. He didn't have a training module for grace, customer-facing. He had a bullet list, de-escalation. Intervene kindly. Don't be a bystander. He wrote real scripts on the whiteboard and underlined it twice, like prayer. Lily found her voice in the back row. Can we also talk about how to check on people after? Her hand still shook a little, a ghost in the bones. I think I wish I'd asked if she wanted me to walk her out. Calhoun nodded. At it, he said, as though at it could snap kindness into policy. Maybe it could, if repeated enough. The teenagers who bagged on weekends were there, too, fiddling with their lanyards, practicing with their faces how not to look away when a thing was happening in the air near them. Robert, who had returned to the store through a side entrance, hat low, a man confronted by aisles of memory, stood at the far end of produce, staring at the shining green of the apples. The video played on an end-cap screen, muted, closed captioned by a machine that misheard Bismillah as Bees Miller. He turned it off. He stood with his fist closed around the handle of his cart, then forced his fingers open. He asked Lily which bouquet was best for an apology that might not be accepted. Lily suggested the simple daisies. He bought 2. He drove to Amina's building and sat in his truck until the air went stale. The daisies wilted at the edges like a bad metaphor. He didn't get out. He didn't text. He rehearsed a sentence. I'm sorry for the harm in me. It crumpled every time. He drove home with the flowers and put them in a jar by the sink. He told himself, tomorrow. Evening slid in with the smell of neighbors grilling and a train's long, mournful horn. The mosque hosted a small gathering, not for Amina specifically. The notice had been posted a week ago, but the air there tilted toward her. Aunties in patterned scarves hugged harder. Young men stood straighter. The imam added a dua at the end. Protect those who stand with gentleness in the face of cruelty. Protect their children. Protect our neighbors, all of them. Amin fell like rain. Layla arrived at Amina's door with dinner. A casserole that could feed an army, a salad bright with pomegranate seeds, a plate of cookies still warm, because grief and celebration both demand sweets. You're not reading comments, are you? Layla asked, tucking the foil edges down. No, Amina said. And also yes, by accident, because my thumb thinks it can carry the world. Layla made a face at the world and its edges. Here, she said, offering a new email address scribbled on a sticky note. Aminastri@. Send anyone here. I'll triage. And I reached out to my cousin. She's in comms. She says we can say no comment 100 different ways. Adam came out, hair smashed into sleep mountains, asking if it was tomorrow. Amina scooped him up and pressed her face into the warm crook of his neck. Almost, she said. They ate late, and Adam told Layla the whole story with the confident chronology of a 6-year-old. There was a cart and a man, and he was loud, and then Mama did her card like Shoop, and then the machine sang, and then, his hands mimed the sliding doors. We went into the sun. Layla's eyes filled up. She blamed the onions in the salad. After dinner, after Adam was asleep for real, after Layla had left with a promise to return in the morning, Amina sat at the kitchen table again and watched the plant's leaves make moon-shaped shadows. She opened the new email. 27 messages in 2 hours. Some invitations, national shows, podcasts, a documentary pitching itself as tender and urgent, some personal letters that read like people putting down small, old stones they'd carried too long. She replied to one, from a woman named Anika. I watched with my grandmother who was Hindu, who taught me to bless those who forgot their own goodness. She's gone now. Your video made me feel her again. Amina wrote back, may her memory be a garden for you. She replied to a second, from a high school principal. Would you speak to our students about courage? She typed I am not a speaker, and then backspace slowly. I'm not sure. Let me think. She did not reply to the shows. She closed the laptop and let the quiet expand. The morning after, the video grew a spine. News cycles stitched it into narratives. Kindness across difference. A new language of dissent. Do we expect too much grace from the targeted? Op-eds boomed. Panels convened. For people and a host. Each rectangle holding a thought with sharpened edges. In one corner, a conservative pundit said, this is America at its best. Individuals solving problems without government interference. In another, a scholar of race and religion said, we must not mistake an extraordinary act of generosity for an excuse to ignore systemic harm. Both were right, and not enough. The story was bigger than the rectangles. At Adam's school, a teacher stopped Amina at pickup, voice careful. "We saw the video," she said. "Some of the kids are talking. We're adding a circle time tomorrow about kindness and—" She searched for a word that didn't flatten. "Courage." She looked at Adam. "Would you like to bring your lemon sticker and tell your class about it?" Adam nodded solemnly, already planning his speech. A package arrived without a return address, a set of watercolor paints, a note. For Adam, to make more bright things in the world. Amina let him open the box and dip a brush, and he painted a door opening into the sun. "This is the store," he announced. "But here is where we went." In a small apartment 2 blocks over, a woman who had never been to a mosque watched the clip at 2 a.m. and wept into the collar of her robe. She wrote Amina an email she wouldn't send. "My brother hasn't spoken to me in 4 years. I kept thinking if I was more cruel, it would make me stronger. But I think I want to be the woman with the card, instead of the one with the finger pointed." The hate refined itself too. A postcard appeared in Amina's mailbox with a printed message in block letters that pretended to be official and was not. She took it to the mosque. The board discussed cameras for the building, a walking group for night prayers, a buddy system for errands. The aunties said, "We have always done this. We will keep doing this." A young man volunteered to install door alarms. Action braided itself with care. Robert stood outside Amina's building at noon with the daisies fresh this time. He had showered and put on a clean shirt. He felt like a boy on his way to a principal's office, except the principal had done nothing wrong and he had scattered tacks on the hallway. He raised his hand to knock. The door opened before he could. Amina stood there in a slate-gray hijab, a color like rain. Her eyes flicked to the flowers, then to his face. "I'm sorry," he said, and the words were not dragged this time. They walked out on their own legs. "I'm not here for a video or for anything, but to say that I am sorry for the harm I carried and set down on you. Thank you for not throwing it back. I am trying to learn how to carry less of it." Amina took a breath. She looked at the hallway camera someone had installed last night, Layla's cousin's doing. She looked back at him. "Thank you for coming," she said. "It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. It was an opening." She took the flowers. "These are kind." He nodded, almost bowed, the hat in his hand. "My daughter asked if we could bring them," he added. "She's in the truck. She wanted to see you say yes, if you said it." Amina glanced past him, saw a girl in a passenger seat, shoulders squared like a decision. She lifted the daisies by an inch in acknowledgement. The girl lifted her hand back, tentative, relieved. Layla insisted that Amina consider a moderated conversation with the community group next week. "Not a big thing," she promised. "Just a circle of chairs at the library, a sign on the door, how we want to be. People need to practice saying things out loud." Amina thought of Adam's face at the sliding doors, his desire to understand, to belong to a story that did not demand he erase himself. "Okay," she said, "but I won't be anyone's exhibit." "You'll be yourself," Layla said. "That's the job." On the 3rd day, a letter arrived hand-addressed from a synagogue across town. "Shalom, Amina. We watched. We bless you. Your courage helps ours." It came with an invitation to a joint potluck. "Bring something with cardamom if you can. We'll bring the challah." Amina smiled at the thought of spices talking to each other on a table. That night, Adam sat cross-legged with his watercolors and painted the supermarket again, this time adding people. A cashier with freckles, a man with a red face that he softened with a wet brush until it blurred, a cluster of phones like little moons, him and his mother glowing white-yellow in the middle like a shared candle. He signed his name with care. Amina dated the back. The national morning show called again. "Gentler, we can blur your face. We can meet you at the mosque. We can just record your hands if you like. Or just your voice. Or nothing at all. We can tell the story without you. We want to do it justice." Amina didn't trust justice on a clock. She wrote back, "No, thank you. Please speak with the cashier if she wants to speak. With the store manager about their training. With our imam about building safer spaces. I am with my son." The producer wrote, "We can do that." She surprised herself by meaning it. The segment that aired the next day was not the one she'd first planned. It featured Lily shaking hands, Calhoun's whiteboard, a shot of the mosque's front door with kids running in and out, and 2 seconds of Adam's painting, used with permission, the faces anonymous but the light unmistakable. The host said, "Kindness is labor," and the word labor slid into a million cups of coffee like a vitamin. In corners that don't tend to get sunlight, the comments still crawled. Someone posted Amina's address, then took it down when another commenter, with a profile picture of a cat and a keyboard's worth of rage, said, "Come on, man, this is a person." It was a small mercy. Small mercies stacked create sturdier shelves. Sunday folded itself gently around the edges of the week. In the afternoon, the community center on Maple opened its doors for the potluck that the synagogue and the mosque had dreamed together. Tables bloomed with dishes, hummus spiked with pomegranate, a tray of lasagna from someone who didn't cook often but cooked when it mattered, challah nestled beside dates, lemonade sweating in a glass barrel. Kids ran under tables and invented games with rules that changed every 30 seconds. Grown-ups hung back at first, then inched forward, then laughed at a joke told in 2 languages. Amina carried a plate of ma'amol dusted with sugar and greeted a woman with a Star of David pendant. They compared recipes in the common kitchen tongue. Pinch, more, a little, until it's right. When the folding chairs scraped into a circle, no one announced a program. People simply sat, scooted, made space. Miguel spoke first, voice steadying itself as it crossed the air. "I saw a thing that made me want to be better," he said. "I came to see if I could practice." Lily spoke next, hands in her lap. "I wish I had asked to walk her out," she said, and the room murmured in the positive tense. "You will next time." Robert didn't speak. He listened with his hat in his hands, a man practicing carrying less harm by carrying more silence. Emily whispered something to him, and he nodded. He would speak when he had earned the vowels. The imam spoke. The rabbi spoke. A woman from the church down the street read a verse about the stranger at the gate, and another about love as a verb with knuckles and knees. Each sentence was a plank across a gap. The room built a small bridge. No one pretended it reached the other shore, but it reached far enough for the next step. When the chairs scraped back and the potluck resumed, Adam tugged at his mother's sleeve. "Can we show them my painting?" he asked. Amina hesitated. There was a tenderness in the paper she wanted to guard, but then she nodded. Adam held it up, and the adults leaned in as if toward a fire. "This is the store," he said in the solemn voice of children who know they are telling a real thing. "This is the man, and Mama, and me. And this," he pointed at the white-yellow wash in the center, "is the part where we were kind." Someone clapped. Someone else put a hand to their mouth. The rabbi said, "Amen," to a painting, and the amen fit. Days stretched. The video's view count climbed into the zone where numbers stop feeling like numbers and start feeling like a weather pattern. Then, as all weather does, it drifted. Another story rose. Amina walked to the store with a list and came home with milk and eggs and apple juice and a bouquet of daisies she didn't pay for. Lily refused, tapping a secret code into the register like a blessing. Amina bought them anyway on a separate order because dignity and kindness both disliked debts. Letters kept coming, slower now, each one a thread. Some she answered late at night with a cup of tea cooling into the kind of silence that feels like a friend. Others she tucked into a box labeled Adam. When older, a few she read only once and then fed to the trash, choosing that the world's bile would not live in her kitchen. From time to time, a stranger would stop her in the produce aisle. "Are you?" they'd begin, and she would either nod or smile or say, "I'm just shopping today," and move them gently back into their own lives. She found that people could be redirected, like carts nudged straight. One afternoon, the store's intercom cracked and Lily's voice, now steadier, office quiet, came on. "Staff reminder. We intervene early. We walk people out if they want. We say sorry if we didn't." Some customers looked up, puzzled. Others nodded, a contract signed without paper. On a Thursday, the principal emailed. "We did the circle." Adam said, "Kind is strong." We wrote it on the board, and then went to recess and practiced, not cutting to the front of the slide. Amina laughed the kind of laugh that turns into a sigh. Slowly, the storm became climate, subtle shifts in the air, new habits, questions asked sooner. The store added a small sign at the entrance, simple, not scolding. "We don't tolerate harassment. We do practice kindness. Ask us to walk you to your car if you want." People noticed. Mostly they didn't. But the sign noticed them. On a shelf above the table, Adam's painting leaned against the wall. In certain afternoon light, the white-yellow center seemed to glow again, not from memory, but from the way the sun moved through the window at 4:13 p.m. Amina often found herself pausing there, dish towel in hand, letting the light touch the part of her that had not been built from endurance, but from joy. When the phone buzzed now, she answered less. When she did answer, she said only the sentences she meant. I am fine. I am tired. I am grateful. We are cooking dinner. No thank you. Yes, I would like to meet your students, but let's keep it small. Yes, I can bring cardamom cake. No, I will not debate my dignity on TV. Peace be upon you. Sometimes, lying in the near dark while Adam counted his breaths towards sleep, she thought of the sliding doors, the sigh they made, the thin line between cold light and heat. She thought of Robert's apology and the way it hadn't mended anything, and yet had mended a little. She thought of Lily's shaking hands and Miguel's voicemail, and the teenagers learning to aim their lenses like instruments instead of weapons. She thought of how people had looked at her that day, first as a screen onto which they could project whatever story they were rehearsing, then as a person. She breathed until she could feel her ribs make space for both truths, that kindness is a risk, and that it is also a tool, and that she had chosen to use it with her son watching. On the fridge, under a magnet shaped like Texas, a grocery receipt lay flattened. All numbers, no poetry. On the back, in her own handwriting, a sentence, carry something lighter. She wasn't sure when she had written it. It felt like something her father had said, and something she had learned herself, and something the store's lights had hummed into her bones that day at Lane 7. Outside, the town kept doing what towns do, mowing lawns, missing buses, burning toast, losing tempers, making up. The clip kept living where clips live, scaled down with every compression, but still holding the shape of the act at its center. People watched it at awkward times, in bathroom stalls between meetings, in parking lots before walking into hard conversations, at 2 a.m., whispering I'm sorry to no one, and then to the right people in the morning. One evening, at dusk, Amina and Adam walked past the store. The sign buzzed like a tired bee. Through the glass, she saw Lily place flowers in a plastic vase near Lane 7. No one made a speech. No one filmed. The flowers were small and looked like they'd been bought with the staff discount. Their stems made the water green. Amina stood with Adam's hand in hers and decided not to go in. She had milk at home. She had the taste of cardamom lingering on her tongue. She had the next day waiting like a fence she could climb. Can we get more stickers next time? Adam asked, eyeing the registers like a treasure map. Yes, Amina said. We'll ask Lily. Do you think the man is kind now? He asked after a few steps. Amina considered the sky as it bruised into purple. I think, she said, he is trying. She squeezed his hand. Trying is a kind of kind. Adam accepted this. He invented a game that required stepping only on cracks and announced that if they made it to the corner without touching a smooth square, they would have good dreams. They made it because they decided to. Night rose, full of windows, each one a tiny theater. In one, Robert stood with Emily and practiced saying hard sentences without flinching. In another, Lily Googled de-escalation scripts and closed the tab after deciding she already had the words she needed if she lowered her voice and raised her attention. In another, Miguel wrote the PDA a message about adding bystander training to the next meeting's agenda and hit send before he could talk himself out of it. In Amina's, steam fogged the kitchen and the smell of rice and cinnamon braided with quiet. It was not a tidy ending because the world does not have those. But something had shifted, and the shift held. The storm had not blown the house down. It had shown everyone where the beams were. When Adam slept, Amina stepped onto the small balcony with a mug warming her palms. The night insects stitched the air into cloth. She looked at the slice of the supermarket's roof visible beyond the trees and whispered a blessing, not because the building needed it, but because she did. Then she whispered another, for strangers she would never meet who were standing in bright aisles somewhere, choosing how to answer someone else's worst fear with their better self. She went inside and closed the balcony door softly. The lemon sticker on the fridge winked. The first letter arrived folded into a perfect rectangle. No return address. The stamp tilted as if the sender had pressed it down with a shaking thumb. Amina found it in the cluster mailbox after walking Adam to school, the morning air already warm enough to soften the glue. She almost didn't open it there on the sidewalk, but habit tugged, and she slid a finger under the edge. The paper crackled. The words were printed in all caps, a font chosen to sound louder than a voice. Go back. You are not welcome. We are watching. Her throat went cold so fast she could taste metal. She folded the letter once, twice, a third time, making the words smaller, then slipped it into her bag and glanced up the street. An ordinary Texas block, sprinklers spurting arcs across tidy lawns, a neighbor scraping paint from a porch rail, a dog sprawled in the square of shade under a juniper. Everything looked exactly the same and nothing did. She didn't tell Adam. She would not hand him the shape of a stranger's fear and call it truth. At home, she set the letter on the table, placed the potted plant a neighbor had given her right on top of it, and texted Layla a single word. Come. Layla arrived with the sound of keys and certainty, read the letter once, then twice, then breathed out through her nose like a kettle about to sing. Okay, she said, the syllables orderly. We document. We tell the mosque. We ask the building to install cameras. And you, my friend, lock your door and drink water because we are not letting hate dehydrate your courage. Amina laughed despite herself, the memory of fear slipping an inch off her shoulders. Water, she agreed, and filled 2 glasses until they were as full as they could get without spilling. By noon the mosque's board had a thread going, practical and tender. A volunteer to coordinate walking buddies for errands, a suggestion for a security assessment, a grandmother in her 70s offering to teach the kids how to notice when a stranger was following them without scaring themselves into shadows. The imam sent a message that ended with, we protect each other, and we keep our hearts soft, not because the world is soft, but because Allah is. Amina read it twice. She didn't know what to do with the heat in her chest, rage, grief, gratitude. So she washed the breakfast bowls again, although they were already clean, and put them in the rack where light landed like a benediction. The second letter came 2 days later, this one smaller, the edges ragged as if it had been torn from a larger sheet. The handwriting wobbled, but was unmistakably human. It said, I filmed you. I posted it. My mom says I should ask if that's okay. My friend says it isn't. I'm sorry. No name. Only a drawing of a lemon sticker in the corner, Adam's lemon. Amina sat and read it with her fingertips pressed to the wood of the table as if to ground herself in the grain. She looked up a moment later and saw Adam coloring a spaceship with fat crayons, humming the 2-note tune he returned to when he felt safe. She wrote a reply on a blank card with a picture of a window on it. Thank you for asking. Please don't show his face. Please tell your friend, thank you for saying the hard thing out loud. She didn't know where to send it. She placed it under the lemon magnet on the fridge, as if that counted. By the weekend, the storm on their screens had organized itself into weather fronts. The local paper printed an editorial that surprised Amina with its clean language. Kindness is not a spectacle, but a discipline. We saw that discipline at Lane 7. The comments were split, of course, aren't they always? But the sentences that mattered to Amina were being said in rooms without comment boxes. Classrooms where teachers queued up the clip and shook before they pressed play. Church basements where potluck pans clinked as someone tried to describe exactly why the video made them ache. The ache found its way to a campus, too. It arrived as a group of students with hand-lettered signs that didn't try to be clever. They came in mismatched t-shirts and thrifted jeans, in a cloud of eagerness that softened the concrete steps outside Amina's building. They didn't chant. They waited. When Amina stepped out with a bag of trash and a surprised look, a tall girl in a denim jacket cleared her throat and said, Ms. Amina, we, saw you at the store. Well, the video. We're from the university down the road. We wanted to say thank you. And also, we wanted to ask if you'd let us walk with you to the market this week. Not because you need it. Because we want to learn how to show up. The bag of trash rustled against Amina's leg. She looked at the girl's hands, ink smudged at the fingertips, the confident posture of someone who had just learned a new kind of courage and wanted to use it without breaking it. All right, Amina said, after the pause that made the yes real. You can carry the heavy things. They did. On Tuesday they met at the corner, a little shy but also bright, like people dressed for a holiday not yet named. Adam walked at the front with his lemon sticker now fossilized on a second shirt, telling the tallest boy about Iron Man's moral code. Inside the store, Lily looked up and grinned so hard her freckles seemed to reorganize themselves. She slid a small sheet of stickers across the counter. For the brave, she said, and added, quieter, for the people who come back. Amina put her hand over Lily's for a breath, and a current passed between them. Not electricity, but something just as real. Recognition, a promise to keep choosing the longer way through. That afternoon, the building manager installed a cheap camera above the entrance. It wasn't elegant, but its little red light blinked like an eyelid that refused to close. The aunties from the mosque organized a phone chain the old way, paper lists and pens, and call me if you see anything that makes your shoulders rise. Layla made a spreadsheet because that is a kind of love too. Someone slid a small bag of tamarind candies under Amina's door with a note. The sweet is not to erase the bitter. It is to keep your mouth from learning only one taste. Still, the dark pressed in sometimes, especially at 3 a.m., that hour when even the refrigerator sounds like it is thinking too loudly. Amina would wake from a dream where the sliding doors never opened and her feet forgot every word for forward, and she would sit up, hand flat on Adam's back to count the breaths that returned her to land. On those nights the letters' angles found their way under her ribs, and she would whisper the surahs she knew by heart, not as spells, not as bargains, but as a way to stitch her body to the story that had held her long before a stranger's mouth tried to unmake her. The invitation to speak came not from a TV studio, but from the community center with scuffed floors and a bulletin board that always smelled faintly of paste. A circle, the flyer said. No microphones. No speeches. Bring your inside voice and your outside shoes. Amina promised herself she would not go. Then she promised herself she would sit in the back with her hands folded and say nothing. Then she walked in at dusk and found that Layla had saved her a seat in the circle and put a paper cup of water there, the lip damp with condensation like a glass sweating before a difficult conversation. The chairs were filled with the ordinary brave. Miguel in his UT shirt, hair still damp as if he had run here. Lily in her store polo, a pin behind her ear as if kindness required note-taking. The elderly woman in lavender from the gum rack. Two teenagers who examined their shoes with the intensity of people trying to see a new future in worn rubber. A woman with a Star of David pendant who introduced herself as Ruth and said she lived 3 blocks away and brought Kugel because she didn't know what else to do. A man in a paramedic uniform who had rolled his sleeves neatly to the same place on each arm. Robert was there too, hat off, more scalp than Amina remembered. Emily beside him with her chin raised in that particular posture teenage girls use when they are choosing to be courageous and want the world to notice and also to act normal about it. No one moderated. They began the way some fires begin. Someone leaned in with a match and a small pile of dry honesty. Miguel spoke first, not because he was the most important, but because the words were stuck near the door of his mouth and wanted out. I didn't say anything, he said, looking at his hands. I held my phone and my breath. That's not the person I want to be. I'm practicing now. Consider this my first rep. He glanced up. If anyone ever needs me to stand up between them and the next bad sentence, call me. The room exhaled like it had been waiting to do that for months. Lily said, my hands were shaking. I thought if I intervened, I'd make it worse. Next time I can say, sir, we don't talk to people like that here. I can suspend your transaction until you lower your voice. It's not poetry. It's something I can say without my throat closing. The paramedic nodded and added, scripts help. When the adrenaline hits, your brain is a drawer of forks. You need a spoon in there. Ruth cleared her throat. My grandmother always told me to bless people who forget their own goodness. She said it grows room in them. Her fingers worried the edge of her paper cup. I watched that video and thought, I have been blessing too quietly. The elderly woman in lavender said, I did not raise my voice when I should have. I have been saving it for church. I think I will use it on Tuesdays too. The teenagers spoke without looking up. We laughed before we knew what we were seeing. We cut that part out of the video because we were ashamed. I think maybe we should have left it in so we remember who we were at the start. The other added, we blurred the man's face when he cried because it felt like hurting him back would make the world smaller again. Robert listened with his hands folded around his hat, like a prayer book. When he finally spoke, his voice didn't sound like the clip had made it sound. It sounded like a road after rain, cleaned, a little raw. I am here to say I am sorry, and also to say I am not asking for forgiveness like it's a receipt you can print for me. I am trying to be the man I told my daughter I was. I have been practicing at the grocery store. Not shouting is the first step. Saying ma'am, like I mean it, is the second. The third. He smiled, faintly embarrassed. The third is carrying the heavy water jugs for people who look like they might need help and waiting to be told yes or no because I don't know anymore what help sounds like. Emily squeezed his elbow. My dad made me watch the video with him, she said, and her voice was steady in a way that made Amina want to hold both of their faces and bless them with her palms. He didn't make excuses. He said, "This is me on my worst day, and I don't want to be him again." I thought you should know. When it was Amina's turn, she didn't stand. She didn't know what her legs would do if she asked them to hold more weight. She folded her hands in her lap and thought of the letter under the plant, the lemon sticker on the fridge, the way Adam's breath evened in sleep after she counted to 30. I keep thinking about doors, she said finally, surprised at the image but trusting it anyway. The sliding doors at the store. The doors of our mouths. The doors we close around each other out of fear. The doors we open out of hope. I walked through one because my son was watching. I would like for him to live in a town where the doors open more often. Silence followed, but not the frozen kind. It was the kind that makes a place sound like it has a heartbeat. After the circle, the potluck moved in like a tide. People stood and bent and reached, the choreography of feeding and being fed. Amina stood at a folding table spooning Mammal onto a plate when Robert approached with his hands open, nothing in them. "May I ask you something?" he said. She nodded. "What do I do when the men I drink beer with say things that taste like what I said that day?" He looked ill with the question. "I used to laugh. Or not laugh. I don't want to be a man who is only soft in public. Be the first person in the room to say no," Amina answered, surprised by her own clarity. "And the second if the first doesn't take. And if your voice shakes, let it. Shaking is still speaking." He nodded as if someone had just handed him a tool he didn't know existed, something with weight and usefulness, not a slogan. Outside, dusk softened the parking lot into a place where neighbors might linger. Adam ran circles around Miguel's knees, chanting, Lemon League, a game he and the students had invented where every kindness earned a sticker and 10 stickers earned a paper crown. The students were already at 8 by their own count because they delivered 2 sacks of rice and 1 apology and counted the apology twice. The next morning returned as mornings do, with cereal and bowls and a stray sock refusing to be found, and the smell of coffee like a promise someone else could keep. Amina packed Adam's lunch, slid a little note into the side pocket that said, "You are brave in the small ways that matter most," and kissed the part of his hair that always sprung back up like a wave remembering its job. On the walk to school, a woman Amina had never seen before slowed her car and rolled down the window to say, "Peace," with an accent that sounded like the Midwest and a face that looked like any face, which is to say, like the world. Not all the shadows were content to live in the edges. One afternoon a truck slowed in front of the building, and someone shouted a word that stuck to the brick and slid down, leaving a stain only Amina could see. She felt her palms go cold, the adrenaline pretending to be a good idea. Layla stood beside her and did the thing they had practiced. She named what was happening in a voice as steady as a metronome. "That was a man driving by making noise with his mouth. He is already gone. We are still here." They went inside and made tea so sweet it made Amina's teeth ache. And still, when Adam asked at dinner why her hands smelled like lemon and metal, she said, "Because I squeezed lemons and held my keys tight." Truth, abbreviated to the size that fit inside a 6-year-old. In the evenings, the inbox crowded with notes. Amina ignored the ones addressed to the internet's idea of her and answered 3 each night addressed to the person who actually lived in her body. A woman in West Virginia wrote, "My father taught me to be suspicious of scarves. I am teaching my son to be suspicious of men who shout." A firefighter said, "I have a script now. I keep it in my pocket with the tourniquet." A 9th grader confessed, "I have been cruel to a girl with a hijab in my math class. Tomorrow I will say I am sorry, and then I will sit next to her when we do group work if she lets me." Amina wrote back, "Say the sorry with both hands. Do the next sentence with your body." The night before the next community circle, Amina found a 3rd letter in her mailbox, the envelope soft as if it had been carried a long way in a sweaty hand. Inside, a single line in careful script. "I said terrible things to you. You bought my groceries. You built a door for me. I am trying to walk through it." No signature. No need. She placed it under the plant and watered them both. When she spoke at the second circle, spoke because she wanted to, not because someone asked, she told a shorter story than anyone expected. "I am tired," she said. And you could feel 24 spines soften in recognition. And I am grateful, and I am sometimes afraid, and I am often hungry, and I am cooking lentils tonight, and I am teaching my son that fear does not get to choose our verbs. Laughter, the low kind, rolled around the room. Robert raised his hand like a student and said, "My verb this week was listen. Next week I'm going to try interrupt." The teenagers whispered, "Same," in unison and pretended they hadn't. There were still nights Amina woke to the echo of the first letter, the one with the caps. The word watching crawled across her skin. On those nights she stood on the balcony and watched back, not the street, but the horizon, dusk layered like silk. She named the good witnesses aloud. Layla with her spreadsheets, Lily with her scripts, Miguel with his reps, Ruth with her blessing, Robert with his hat in his hands, Emily with her new spine, the students with their lemon league, the imam with his dua, the rabbi with her braided bread, the aunties with their phone tree, the building manager with his small, blinking camera that had become, somehow, a candle. She added her father's voice from Damascus, even if it only lived in her memory now. Carry something lighter. The list grew long enough that the night had to make more room to hold it. On a Saturday morning heavy with humidity, Amina and Adam walked to the farmer's market. They bought peaches that bruised if you looked at them too hard, and still tasted like a sun you could eat. Robert stood by a stall with a sign for local honey. Emily beside him with a tote bag that said vote like a girl. They waved. Not the awkward wave of apology, but the ordinary one neighbors use when they have agreed to keep trying. "Ma'am," Robert said, and it sounded like respect instead of habit. "Sir," Adam said to the honey vendor, and the man grinned like he had just been promoted. On the way home, Adam asked, "Is the storm over?" He meant the internet, the letters, the trucks that paused a beat too long. Amina considered. The cicadas pulsed. The clouds built towers and erased them. "Storms end and begin all the time," she said. "We are learning where the dry ground is. We are planting trees." He accepted this the way children accept weather, practically. "Can we plant a lemon tree?" he asked. "We can try," she said. And they did. A small pot on the balcony. A bright green promise with leaves too soft to know the wind yet. That night, when she tucked him in, Adam pressed a page into her hand. A drawing of the supermarket again, this time with a door painted so wide anyone could walk through. In the doorway, he had drawn two stick figures holding hands, one small, one tall, both crowned with yellow halos he had made by circling the crayon until the paper shined. "This is before and after," he said, pointing first to the left, then to the right. "But they're the same door." He yawned hugely, folded himself into sleep, and left the room breathing. Amina stood at the window and looked out over a town that was not safer and also was, that had not changed and also had, that was still itself and yet had found, in some small stubborn corners, new instructions. Her phone buzzed on the table. She let it. The plant leafed quietly. The letter under it softened at the corners, its edges taking in the room's humidity like a traveler taught, finally, how to rest. Amina turned off the lamp and sat in the dark for a minute, because sometimes light is not the bravest thing. Sometimes staying still and letting the night keep you company is. Then she rose, moved to the kitchen, poured lentils into a bowl to soak for tomorrow, and smiled when the water turned cloudy. Proof that what needed to loosen was loosening. In another room, a lemon seed thought about roots. In another apartment, a man practiced a script that began, "We don't talk like that here," and felt his voice quake and counted that as success. In the house with the lavender cardigan, a woman made a list titled, "Places to Use My Church Voice." In the store with the humming lights, Lily laminated a small card that read, "We will walk you out if you want," and taped it under her register where her fingers could find it when her courage needed reminding. Shadows still leaned against the walls in places the light hadn't reached yet, but they were thinner than before, and light is immodest, it insists. Amina rinsed the lentils until the water ran clear, and the bowl held something that looked, at last, like enough. She wiped her hands, turned off the tap, and whispered the blessing she had made for herself out of all the others. "May our doors open the right way." The words hung in the kitchen a moment, comfortable. She switched off the light and went to bed, where her son dreamed of trees with fruit shaped like stickers, and she dreamed of a lane in a store where the sign above read not express, not self-checkout, but simply, in black letters on white, Choose again. The first cool wind of autumn slid through the town one morning, rattling the pecan trees and scattering brittle leaves across the sidewalks. Amina noticed it as she pulled Adam's jacket tighter before walking him to school. The air felt different, less heavy, less watchful, as if the heat of summer, with all its sharp edges, had finally surrendered to something gentler. She breathed it in and thought, the storm has not passed, but the sky has changed. Adam skipped ahead, his backpack bouncing, the lemon tree drawing he had taped inside still crisp from last night's art class. "Mama," he called, "if the lemon tree grows taller than me, does that mean I win?" His laughter spun into the air like a kite string. Amina smiled and called back, "We both win." The walk to school had become safer, or maybe just steadier. Neighbors who once avoided her gaze now nodded in greeting. Some paused to talk, hesitant at first, then warming as words found them. The old man who watered his lawn every morning waved with his hose hand and said, "Beautiful day." The woman who walked her dachshund slowed to let Adam pet the dog, her face shy with the effort of kindness. Small gestures, ordinary as bread, but together they wove something that had not existed before, a sense that the road itself had been repaved with recognition. At the community center, the circles continued every Thursday evening. They were no longer extraordinary, no longer news. They were simply a habit, like brushing teeth, like folding laundry. And yet, for those who came, they mattered more than sermons. Miguel came with his notebook, writing down lines that others spoke. Lily arrived straight from her shift, apron still dusted with flour, her laminated, "We will walk you out if you want" card tucked under the register like a talisman. Ruth brought kugel again, each time insisting she had perfected the recipe, though everyone already thought it perfect. The teenagers came too, no longer carrying their phones like shields. They listened, they confessed, they practiced interrupting each other with kindness instead of competition. Robert came every week, hat in hand, his apologies no longer desperate but deliberate. He had stopped trying to repair the moment, and instead worked on repairing himself. One week he said, "I told my friends at the bar that I won't laugh anymore when they say the old lines. They didn't like it. I told them I'm still coming back next Thursday whether they like it or not." His voice had the texture of someone laying bricks, slow, steady, intended to last. Emily sat beside him, smiling just enough to show her braces. For Amina, the circles had become both anchor and burden. She was grateful, but she was also tired. Every story seemed to brush against her skin, reminding her of the aisle, the shouting, the way her son's apple had rolled across the floor. Sometimes she wanted to scream, "I don't want to be your symbol anymore. I just want to buy groceries." But she never said it. Instead, she spoke of doors, of seeds, of the small ways people could carry lighter loads. And when she came home afterward, she stood on her balcony with the potted lemon tree and let the night hold her silence. The letters kept coming, though fewer now. Most were kind. "Your strength gives me hope. I told my class about you. I am trying to raise my son like you raise yours." Some were not. They arrived like pebbles tossed at her window, loud in the moment, forgettable by morning. She saved the good letters in a shoebox under Adam's bed, a box she planned to give him one day when he was old enough to understand what it meant to be carried by strangers' words. The cruel letters she tore into strips and burned in the sink, the ash rinsed away with water. The video, though no longer at the center of the internet storm, still surfaced unexpectedly. Amina would hear her voice, "Because my son is watching," echo from a TV in the laundromat, or see her silhouette flash across a neighbor's phone screen. Each time, she felt a pinch in her chest, as if her private courage had been pickpocketed and sold to the crowd. But she learned to live with it, to remind herself that what mattered was not the clicks or the captions but the way Adam now said, without hesitation, "Kind is strong." One evening, as the community circle was winding down, Ruth asked, "What if we made this permanent? Not just Thursdays, not just when the news remembers us. What if we made a house of doors? A place where people could come in, tell their stories, learn how to speak up before silence hardens?" She looked at Amina when she said it, her eyes gentle but certain. The room hummed. Miguel said, "We could run workshops." Lily added, "We could train staff from other stores." The teenagers grinned. We could make videos, but like, good ones, for once. Robert, his hands folded tight, said quietly, I'll build whatever walls you need. I know how to use a hammer. Amina listened. Her heart tugged in two directions. Part of her wanted to say no, to leave the burden at the edge of the circle, to walk away and be just a mother, just a teacher, just a woman who cooked lentils and planted seeds. But another part of her, older, heavier, knew that the door she had opened in Lane 7 could not be shut again. If she walked away, others would stumble in the same silence. She looked around the room at these people, each of them carrying pieces of her story now, and realized it was no longer just hers. It had become theirs, too. House of Doors, she repeated softly. The name felt right in her mouth, like something her father might have said, like something Adam might one day paint. Yes, let's build it. The project began small. They cleared out a dusty room in the community center, scrubbed the walls, painted them a warm yellow. Miguel brought second-hand chairs, Lily a bulletin board, Ruth a bookshelf stacked with novels about strangers finding each other. The teenagers designed a sign, House of Doors, come in, choose again. Robert installed the frame himself, his hands steady, his face set with the quiet pride of a man making amends. Amina brought the lemon tree from her balcony and set it in the corner, its young leaves trembling in the draft. On opening day, a dozen people came. They sat in the yellow room and told stories. A woman who had been mocked for her accent at the DMV. A teenager who had stood up to his uncle's cruel jokes. A cashier from another town who said she froze when a customer spat at a woman in a headscarf, and who wanted to learn how not to freeze next time. Amina sat in the circle, her hands folded in her lap, and listened. She spoke only once, when a boy asked, How do you know when to say something? She answered, When silence feels heavier than fear. The weeks rolled on. The House of Doors became a rhythm, not a spectacle. Some nights, only 5 people came. Some nights 30. Sometimes the stories were small, almost ordinary. A teacher correcting a student gently, a neighbor sharing sugar across a fence. Sometimes they were raw, trembling, heavy. Always they were held. Always they were answered with listening. At home, Adam grew taller. The lemon tree stretched too, leaves glossy under the window light. One day, Adam held a ruler to it and announced, triumphant, It's taller than me now. Amina laughed and said, Then we both win. He drew another picture, this one of the tree with wide doors swinging open at its base. This is where people go in, he explained. And when they come out, they're different. The shadows never disappeared completely. Strangers still shouted sometimes. Letters still arrived, blunt and ugly. But Amina learned to measure the dark not by how loud it was, but by how much light still lived beside it. For every cruel note, there were 10 kind ones. For every shouted word, a circle of neighbors answered with silence that was not empty but full, strong, deliberate. Months later, on a rainy evening when the House of Doors had become as familiar as the supermarket once was, a woman slipped in, dripping from her umbrella. She sat down, trembling, and said, I am the sister of the man from the video. Robert, I wanted to see for myself. I wanted to tell you I am ashamed, and also grateful, because he is different now. He eats dinner with us again. He laughs with Emily. He still has a long way to go, but thank you for building a door big enough for him too. Amina felt her throat tighten. She looked at Robert, who sat across the circle, his face flushed, his hands folded around his hat. He did not look at her, but at the lemon tree in the corner, its leaves catching the yellow light. For the first time, Amina felt forgiveness stir, not as a duty, not as a performance, but as a seed finally ready to sprout. When she went home that night, Adam was asleep, his drawings scattered across the floor. She gathered them, smoothing each one. Doors, trees, people holding hands. She placed them in the shoebox with the letters, the good ones. She tucked the box back under his bed. Then she stood at the window and looked out into the night. The town was the same, cars, streetlights, barking dogs, but something in it had shifted, like a door left ajar. She whispered, May our doors stay open. And for the first time since Lane 7, she felt not just the weight of what had happened, but the light of what could still come. The storm had left scars, but it had also carved new rivers. Shadows still lingered, but the light had learned to insist. And Amina, mother, teacher, witness, builder, stood in the middle of it, carrying her son, her neighbors, her town. carrying them all into the next door, and the next, and the next.